Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really diving into a pretty incredible story from the Bible, Acts chapter 27. It's like this, high-stakes survival journey on the Mediterranean Sea.
Absolutely. And it's got these deeper layers, too, about, well, human plans versus maybe something bigger.
Exactly. Our source material, it really breaks down this chapter. Some people call it Paul's fourth missionary journey, his voyage to Rome.
Yeah, though it's important to say up front, it wasn't like his usual trips, setting up churches everywhere.
Right.
But the core idea of sharing his faith, that was still there. It's just the circumstances were dramatic, to say the least.
Totally. And Paul wasn't sailing solo on this trip. Luke, who wrote Acts, he uses we a lot here, so he was definitely on board.
Great, gives it that eyewitness feel. And Aristarchus was there, too, a colleague of Paul's from Thessalonica. Talk about loyalty.
Seriously. Willing to go along, even though Paul was, a prisoner.
Yeah, that's the crucial bit. He's under guard. Julius, a Roman centurion, is in charge of him.
And not just any centurion.
No, exactly. Part of the imperial regiment, the Praetorian cohort, like the emperor's own guards.
Wow. So elite troops. Special privileges, double pay, the works.
It definitely shows Rome was keeping a close eye on Paul, even as a prisoner. Makes you wonder what they were expecting.
Okay, so let's get the journey underway. They set sail from Adramyttium, right, over in Asia Minor.
Yep, planning to hug the coast, hitting ports in that province.
But things didn't exactly go smoothly from the start, did they?
Not really. First stop was Sidon, modern Lebanon. And here's where it gets interesting.
Oh, so?
Well, Julius, the centurion, he lets Paul go ashore, see friends, get supplies.
Huh. That seems generous for a prisoner.
It does. And our source kind of flags this as maybe a sign of God's care already at work. Unexpected kindness,
Yeah, that's a great point. God working through a Roman officer. But that early favor didn't mean easy sailing ahead.
No, definitely not. They ran straight into contrary winds, big ones, messed up their whole planned route to Rome.
So they couldn't sail direct.
Nope. Forced them to tuck in close to the sheltered side of Cyprus first.
Okay.
And then creep along the coasts of Cilicia and Pamphylia. This wasn't a pleasure cruise. It was a battle against the wind.
They're totally at the mercy of the weather.
Pretty much. Eventually, they make it to Myra, down in Lycia, which is southern Turkey today.
And Myra was a big deal back then.
Oh, yeah. A major port, especially for grain ships heading from Egypt to Rome. Vital supply line for the empire.
Right, connecting their journey to that huge Roman trade network.
Exactly. And it's in Myra that Julius finds another ship, an Alexandrian one, probably a massive grain freighter, also going to Italy.
So they transfer Paul and the others onto this bigger ship.
Correct. These ships were the lifeblood of Rome, in a way. Huge vessels.
Okay, so new ship, hopefully better luck.
Yeah.
But, spoiler alert, not really.
Yeah, this is where the voyage gets really tough. Progress from Myra was incredibly slow.
The text says many days, right?
Took them ages just to reach Cnidus, near the tip of Turkey. The winds were just relentlessly against them, couldn't make headway west.
So another detour.
Yep. Had to turn south, sail along the coast of Crete, under its shelter around Cape Salmon.
Just constantly fighting the elements.
Constantly. They finally reach a place called Fair Havens, near a town called Lycia. Apparently, it's still a harbor today.
Okay, Fair Havens. Sounds nice, but maybe not ideal.
Well, here's an interesting take from our source. It suggests maybe these headwinds weren't just obstacles.
What do you mean?
Like maybe it wasn't God hindering Paul, but actually guiding them, pushing them toward this specific harbor to wait out the dangerous weather.
Huh. Reframing the difficulties as guidance. That's something to think about. Like how setbacks in your own life might be nudges in a different direction.
Exactly, because it's at Fair Havens that Paul steps up with a serious warning. He sees the danger.
Right. The timing was bad.
Very bad. The source mentions it was after Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Any experienced sailor knew that meant winter was coming, and sailing was becoming extremely hazardous.
But Paul says, don't do it.
Pretty much. He advises them not to continue. He predicts disaster, loss of cargo, loss of the ship, loss of life. A really stark warning.
Based on his experience? Or maybe something more?
Could be both. He'd sailed a lot. But given what happens later, maybe it was divine insight too. But his advice? Ignored.
Why?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they listen? Especially the centurion.
Well, Julius had a choice. Paul, the prisoner, or the ship's pilot and owner, the professionals.
The experts.
Right. And they likely thought they could still make it to a better winter harbor. So Julius deferred to them. Practical experience versus maybe a spiritual insight. It's a classic tension.
And the majority agreed.
Yeah, most people wanted to push on to Phoenix, another port on Crete. They thought it offered better protection from the winter winds.
Safer anchorage. Seemed logical, I guess.
It probably did. The appeal of a slightly better, more convenient option, even against a strong warning. It's easy to see how that happens.
And then they get this little bit of false hope. Right.
Exactly. A gentle south wind springs up. Seems like perfect sailing weather. Validates their decision, they probably thought.
So they hoist anchor, sail along the coast of Crete, feeling pretty good about things.
Feeling like they're in control.
Yeah.
And then, bam!
The Everkillon.
The Everakalon. A ferocious northeasterly gale. The text makes it sound like it just slammed into them.
Total chaos.
Utter chaos. The ship was just overwhelmed, couldn't sail into the wind, couldn't do anything but get driven by it.
Powerful image of losing control when you ignore the warnings.
Absolutely. They somehow barely managed to haul the lifeboat on board as they blew past this tiny island called Cauda. Must have been incredibly difficult.
I can't even imagine. And then they were worried about Africa.
Yeah, the Sirtis sandbars off North Africa. Notorious ship graveyard. So they start taking emergency measures, undergirding the ship with cables, lowering gear to try and slow the drift. Desperation sets in.
And it just gets worse.
Day after day. First, they jettison cargo, the non-essential stuff.
Trying to lighten the ship.
Then, the next day, they throw over the ship's tackle. The actual sailing equipment. Their means of making a living, gone. Survival is the only thing that matters now.
Wow. And then the darkness.
Yeah. For days, the source says, no sun, no stars, just storm, completely lost, no navigation possible.
Oh, just evaporates.
Totally gone. The text literally says they gave up all hope of being saved, just being tossed around in the dark, waiting for the end. Hard to picture that kind of despair.
But it's right there, at rock bottom, after days without really eating, that Paul steps up again.
Yeah, he stands up among them, reminds them, maybe a little pointedly, about his earlier warning. Like, I told you this would happen.
A bit of an I told you so.
Maybe a bit. But then he shifts gears. He tells them to take heart.
Seriously,
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yeah. He says, look, no one's going to die. Not a single life will be lost. The ship's a goner, but you will survive.
Where did that come from?
A divine message. He tells them an angel visited him the night before. An angel of the God he served told him not to be afraid because he had to stand trial before Caesar in Rome.
So Paul's survival was guaranteed.
Guaranteed. But then the angel added something amazing. God had graciously granted safety to everyone sailing with Paul. All 276 people.
Wow. So because of Paul, everyone else gets saved too, even though they didn't listen to him earlier.
Exactly. It's this incredible picture of grace spilling over, one person's faithfulness impacting everyone around them.
That's profound. God's protection extending beyond just the believer.
It really is. Paul says he trusts God completely, but he also repeats the consequence of their earlier choice. They will run aground on an island somewhere.
Okay, so fast forward. 14th night of this nightmare. They're still drifting.
Still drifting in the Adriatic, which back then covered a larger area, including the central Mediterranean. Then the sailors start to suspect something.
Land.
Yeah, they think they're getting close. They start taking soundings, measuring the depth.
What did they find?
Depth decreasing. 20 fathoms, then 15. So about 120 feet, then 90 feet. Definitely getting shallower. Land is near.
Relief, but also fear, right? Crashing in the dark.
Huge fear. They drop 4 anchors from the stern, trying to slow the ship down, stop it from hitting rocks before daylight.
And they prayed for dawn. I bet they did.
Intensely, you'd imagine. But then panic starts to brew among the sailors.
What happened?
They decide to bail. They try to lower the lifeboat, pretending they need to put out anchors from the front of the ship.
Sneaky. Just trying to save themselves.
Classic self-preservation, but Paul sees right through it.
Of course he does. What does he do?
He goes straight to Julius and the soldiers, tells them flat out, unless these sailors stay with the ship, you cannot be saved.
Why? They needed the sailors' skills.
Presumably. To handle the ship in those last crucial moments, maybe help with getting ashore. They couldn't afford to lose the experienced crew.
So what did the soldiers do?
They didn't mess around. They just cut the ropes to the lifeboat, let it drift away.
Whoa. Harsh.
Seems harsh, yeah. But probably necessary to stop a mutiny and keep everyone focused on collective survival, just like Paul said.
Okay, so lifeboat's gone. Dawn is starting to break. Now what?
Paul takes charge again. Practical and spiritual leadership. He urges everyone to eat something.
After 2 weeks of barely anything.
Exactly. He says, you need your strength for what's coming. Reminds them again, God promised nobody would be harmed. not a hair on their heads.
That's incredible confidence.
It is. And then he does something powerful. He takes bread, thanks God publicly in front of everyone.
Like a communion?
Maybe not formally, but the act of giving thanks, breaking bread, it was a profound statement of faith in that moment. He starts eating.
And that breaks the tension.
It seems to. The source says everyone was encouraged and they all started eating too. Restored their courage, gave them some energy.
Strength for the final push.
Right. So after eating, one last act of desperation, they throw the grain overboard.
The main cargo. The reason for the voyage for the ship owners.
All of it. Into the sea. Lighten the ship as much as possible for running it aground. No thought of profit now. Just survival.
Day breaks fully. Can they see where they are?
No, they don't recognize the land. But they spot a bay. Looks like it has a sandy beach.
That's their target.
That's the plan. Run the ship aground right there. So they cut the anchor ropes, untie the rudder paddles, hoist the foresail.
And aim for the beach? Full speed ahead.
Pretty much. They're committing everything to this one maneuver.
But it doesn't quite work out.
No. Disaster strikes again. They hit a sandbar or maybe a reef where two currents meet.
Oh, no.
The bow gets stuck fast, jammed tight. But the stern, the back of the ship, is still getting pounded by the waves. It starts breaking apart.
The ship is literally disintegrating around them.
Right.
What about the soldiers and the prisoners?
The soldiers' first instinct. Kill the prisoners.
Wow.
Roman military code. If prisoners escaped during a shipwreck, the guards were held responsible, often with their own lives. Easier to just execute them.
That's
It was their standard procedure. But Julius steps in.
the centurion again.
Yes. The text says specifically he wanted to save Paul, so he forbids the soldiers from killing anyone.
Paul's presence saves the prisoners again.
Seems like it. Instead, Julius orders everyone into the water. Swimmers go first.
And the non-swimmer.
Grab onto planks, bits of debris from the wreckage, anything that floats. Make for shore however you can.
Just complete chaos, clinging to wreckage in the surf. And the outcome?
Absolutely stunning. The final line of the account is simple. Every single person reached the land safely. All 276 of them.
Against all odds, after everything they went through.
It's incredible. A powerful demonstration of God's promise, God's faithfulness, even when everything went wrong due to human choices earlier.
So, like you said, not a standard missionary trip.
No.
But our source points out, it absolutely served God's bigger purpose, didn't it? It got Paul one step closer to Rome, shipwrecked or not.
Exactly. He needed to get there. And it leaves us with this really powerful takeaway, I think, that even when we make poor choices, even when we end up in storms, sometimes of our own making, God's grace is still there. His favor can still operate, not just for us, but like on that ship, for everyone connected to us.
That collective survival really drives that home. Amazing story. Faith, survival, unexpected grace. It definitely makes you think about challenges differently.
It really does. And maybe a question for you listening is, when you face those headwinds, those contrary winds in life, are you looking for how God might be guiding you, even through the difficulty? Maybe toward an unexpected safe harbor you hadn't planned on.
That's a deep thought to end on. Thank you for walking us through Acts 27.
So much.
Sarah.
My pleasure. It's a chapter that just keeps giving, doesn't it?
It really does. And thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you some food for thought.
Aha.
Now, just before we wrap up, we want to shift focus for a moment to Enduring Freedom Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fantastic organization doing really vital work on the ground. They help people who are really struggling.
It's an incredible thing.
Yeah, and get this. For just $4 a month, seriously, that's probably less than a fancy coffee, you can help EFM provide essentials for one person.
What kind of essentials?
We're talking a hot meal, some groceries to take with them, clean clothes, even a haircut, and access to laundry services. Basic needs that restore dignity.
$4 makes that possible for someone. That's amazing.
It really is. So if stories about resilience and God's provision, like the one we just talked about, resonate with you, please consider supporting Enduring Freedom Ministries, helping them provide that practical care. You can find donation info on their website.
Definitely worth checking out.
And there's another way to connect with their work. There's a book called Misfits for Jesus, True Accounts of People Experiencing Jesus.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that.
It's full of powerful, true stories about how God works through EFM, changing lives, real stories of hope and transformation. You can grab Misfits for Jesus on Amazon.
Great way to see faith in action.
Absolutely. And finally, if you enjoyed this discussion and want more like it, please do subscribe to the Olive Grove Podcast right here on YouTube. It helps us keep these deep dives coming.
Your support means a lot.
It really does. Until next time, take care.